Well, we'll hopefully be able to see from Brian in a little bit. This Thinker Growth Community Tuesday, October 17th, we're talking about the Enneagram, introduction to the Enneagram and what that means for your personality and understanding yourself and others, and then what the benefits or maybe risks are in knowing that information when you apply it to being an entrepreneur. So,
Mhm.
Paul, this is a topic that you have been very involved in. I don't know whether we talked about it early on. I started to read the Enneagram stuff maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago.
Hmm. Yeah, so I'll tell the story, but first a couple of necessary disclaimers because people hear you talking about this stuff. Oh boy, here they go. They want to pigeonhole us, right? They want to put us in a little box and all that sort of stuff. So,
It's not astrology.
it's not astrology. It's not woo-woo. It's not hocus pocus. It is simply a way of understanding the lenses that we use individually to perceive and process the world and each other. And so what I like to tell people is, rather than pigeonholing, right, as Jason, as you and I were talking about a few moments ago, each human being has some degree of all different personality types in them. Now, that degree could be 0.01%, like it is for me with a couple of ones, and you were saying the same thing. Or it could be 99.99%, right? You could score very high in one particular category and low in the rest. Most people sort of land somewhere in between on certain ones. They're very low, they're high, they're in their middle ground. And all we're attempting to do here, in my mind, is to answer this question that was put to me by Brian Ahern, who you and I are going to chat to here in a few days, influence expert with the Cialdini method. He did a brilliant job on my old podcast one time. He asked me, he said, one person you talk to on the phone, a sales conversation, if you ask for the sale today, there's no way in hell you're going to get it. Okay? Okay. Yeah, I could relate to that. But then comes another person who, if you don't ask for the sale today, there's no way in hell you're going to get it. And do you know which one you're dealing with? Right? Particularly if you can't see them and all you can do is hear their voice, right? Are there clues that can sort of lead you to understand I'm dealing with a assertive domineering type or a diminutive go along to get along type? Am I dealing with a very austere, nerdy analyst who wants to process information and, work through spreadsheets? Or am I dealing with a heart-centered person who just wants to build relationships and be close? And all of these are covered, and I don't endorse the Enneagram to the exclusion of others. It's just the one I've studied the most. Right. But if you've done this with Myers-Briggs or what's they got this one workplace, I forget what it's called. If you've done DISC, right, they're all useful. They're all helpful. I find Enneagram is helpful because it digs deep into motives. And what's one of the most interesting things to notice about people is you can actually have two different personality types have the same reaction to a certain stimulus, but they're driven by different motives inside. And if you understand what those motives are, you can respond to each person differently over time through study and reflection and knowing which one you're dealing with. You can respond to them appropriately versus doing give the boy a hammer and the whole world is a nail approach, where you worked with this person over here, so now it must work with this person over here. Boom, no, it didn't. Oh well, I guess that didn't work. So all of that to put the disclaimer out of the way, and then to say, we got to answer that question. We're all entrepreneurs. We're all trying to sell services or products in the marketplace, but we're running up against this infinite smorgasbord of personalities. And it's more than, the rainbow is a good analogy, but more than the rainbow, all colors on the rainbow have shades and variants and subtly different, right? That Naomi, I have to tease the fairer sex again here. You ladies have such an advantage of seeing these different shades of colors. I was rebuked by my bride the other day. I said, that looks like blue. She said, no, it's not blue.
Was it
And I
teal?
said, I said, well, then what is it? And she named it off. I didn't know what the color was. I'd never heard of it before. So,
so let's hit this for just a quick second. For somebody who doesn't know what the Enneagram is, it's a personality test that then moves people into or describes 9 different personality types that, like you talk about, have developed over time. It's probably your nature, it's probably your nurture. And then how you then, like you talk about, see the world. Naomi, what's your familiarity with the Enneagram? I feel like we talked about this at some point.
Taken it before, but it's been years. I want to say I was like something like an 8 with like isn't there like the positive side and the negative side? Like you have the positivities of one number and the negativities of a different number.
Yeah, there's like wings.
Yeah. I want to say like I had like the positivities of an 8 and the negativities of like a 3. And I have no idea what they are at this point, but I remember the intricacies that went into it. It's not a matter of like if you look at the color code system, like the 4 personalities of the colors, you have red, white, blue, and yellow. They're very structured, like their motivations, basically their motivations and how they hold on to emotions. And that's basically it. You don't really, there's not too much delving into the other stuff. Like I know there's a whole book, but it's not really, it cuts down to motivations and how they hold their emotions. And Enneagrams goes into predictability of personalities and goes into patterns, the whole 9 yards. I remember it was very, very much more intricate than I had seen before. Yeah.
So these 9 types, type 1 is the perfectionist, type 2, the helper, type 3, the performer, type 4, the romantic, 5, the investigator, 6, the loyalist, 7, the enthusiast, 8, the challenger, and 9, the peacemaker, which are your kind of core tendencies. And like you bring up then, Naomi, there are wings, kind of, it's this with this other, like I'm a 5 with the 10, kind of the tendencies of the 6, or I'm a 5 with the tendencies of the 4. And then it also pretty accurately, in my opinion, describes where it's a sort of a graph as well, where for instance, I'm a 5 or have the tendencies of 5 primarily, where I go under stress. So if I'm a stressed out 5, here's how I'm going to show up to my world and how I'll perceive things. And then if I'm in a growth mode, here's where I'll go when I'm feeling in my kind of growth energy, which I think for me, it's been very helpful to understand my tendencies. And it pretty accurately, like you talked about, Paul, uncovers the motivations, which has helped me go to a new level of inventory or honesty about how I show up and how I process things and what's really driving that. Because if you can get to what's driving it, then you can getting to the fire because you see the smoke. Because there's not, these tendencies have benefits and drawbacks as well, but the drawbacks can be minimized by understanding and fighting against some of these things. Like, do I really want to show up this way? This is really helpful for me, rather than just being rooted in this. I'm the way I am. Yeah. I found that to be helpful.
It's kind of like, traumas. When we look back at childhood traumas or things like that, you can see what motivates a negative reaction or behavior or trigger for you. And you have an option to do something about it. If you don't know what's going to trigger you, if you don't have understanding of those childhood traumas, you're not going to be able to approach it differently because you're not going to understand why you react that way. So you're not going to recognize that there's something that can be changed, that can be addressed. Hi. So if you know if you know your negative side of it, then you'll be able to, if you know how you tend to show up, then you have an opportunity to then recognize that, be tuned into that, and be watching for that if you want to show up differently.
Hi, buddy.
We suddenly had a new guest on the Thinker Growth workshop here.
Started young.
The other thing that's, when you get even deeper into it, what you find is that there are people who correspond to a sort of a stereotypical one of those. And then there are people who seem to fly against it. which you would think, oh, then they must not be that number. No, in fact, they are. They're a counter type, right? And so one of the most easily accessible versions of this, I have a couple of them in my life, is the counter type of the Enneagram 8, the challenger. And I have worked for an 8 who was a very regular, run-of-the-mill, stereotypical 8. And then I have men like my father-in-law and my mentor, who are both counter type 8s, who are very benevolent and kind and generous. They're take charge. They're authoritative type people. They don't like being controlled, but they're not antisocial. They're not, they're challenging, but very kind about it. Very almost cautious in how much they use it. And a lot of that also has to do with the degree of work that you're doing inside yourself to understand those motives and to become better. But the bottom line is, right, it's like the temptation is to think you see the external characteristics, and if you study these personality numbers enough, you'll say, oh, that person's a 7, or oh, that person's a 3. And then you find out, they take the test and it's like, no, that person's actually a 9, or they're actually a 2. And you're like, wow, I never saw that coming. And it's so it takes all of that into account.
Yeah. Well, and it's also important, I think, as Naomi is hanging out with children today, we see these things, these tendencies in us in light of other people. And so how we show up for other people becomes that narrative that we get to basically read out there and then determine, is this the narrative that I want to see going forward? So like looking at two different distinct types here, I'm essentially the tendencies of type 5. So a type 5 at a glance, the basic desire is to be independent and capable. The biggest fear is being incompetent or helpless. And in stress, I'll take on the qualities of a 7, clinging to things more tightly and focusing solely on my own need for safety. The 5s become frivolous, disorganized, distracted, maybe even condescending, living completely in heads without thinking of others. But in security, 5 takes on the qualities of an 8, making dramatic shift towards spontaneity and confidence. They become more talkative and energetic in the space. So that's a 5 in a just real basic description. And there's a whole massive book on this. Whereas a 2 is the helper. So the 5 is the investigator, standing at the corners of the room, watching the lay of the land to get all the details in before we move in. And then we know what we're doing. The 2 is a helper. So they are motivated by a need to feel indispensable to those that they love. So the basic desire is to feel loved and needed. The biggest fear is being unloved or taken for granted. In stress, a 2 becomes like an 8. They're demanding, controlling, manipulative as they shift blame and ruminate on past wrongs, because, they feel taken for granted. So in stress, that's going to be emphasized. In security, a 2 becomes more like a 4. They're comfortable with self-care and investing in themselves while realizing they don't have to pretend to love everybody. Whereas, if we contrast that with a 5, we don't need to be loved.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay. You don't have to love me. Because I don't have a fear that you're not going to love me.
Mm-hmm. Jason, I'll say this from, a couple of years now of having lengthy conversations one after the other. When I see you at your best, I see a lot of 8, healthy 8, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what that, and the most salient example of that is your casual, tough love bluntness with people about this is the way it really is, right? So what's improved my sales conversations, because I'm a 4, right? So I'm very, very conscious of shame. Yes, I am a romantic. I may not sound like one, but I am one. And I'm very heart-centered. So I have tremendous empathy for the other person, and it goes against my instincts to talk that way to people. But in fact, it's exactly what they want to hear. It's exactly what they need to hear, and the right people will be refreshed and invigorated by that, and they're drawn to it, right? So I've learned to to say what I heard you saying, right? Which is like people say, I want to write a book. No, you don't. Right? Just that casual, direct confrontation, but it's not obnoxious or combative for its own sake. It's telling people the truth, right? Which is one of the eight's great strengths, is you always know where you stand with them. And so if you're a 5 and that's you, when you're doing well, you become more like an 8, like a healthy 8. That's one of the clearest examples I've seen of it. Plus, right, as you mentioned, you don't feel the need to be loved like a 2. You're like, don't have to love me. I don't care. So it's wonderful when you begin to connect these dots. Say, oh, okay, this is exactly how I should be behaving if I'm doing well. Same for me, right? As a 4, when I'm healthy, I gravitate to the high side of 1, and I become really, really good at getting things done, like getting good quality work done on time to standard. So when I'm healthy and when I'm paying attention and doing the work and making the right investments in myself and in relationships, it buoys me to get off my duff and take action. Because the 4's tendency when they're not doing so well is to just sit and think and feel instead of acting. So yeah, it's a wonderful sort of graph / matrix, and you can immediately, okay, where am I on this? And what do I need to do? And then, of course, the other thing is, who am I dealing with? And are they exhibiting healthy traits, unhealthy traits? And what does that say? How does that inform how I process and respond to what they do?
Yeah. Naomi, do you have something to add on that? I know you
I might.
juggling
We'll see.
things.
We'll see if he lets me talk. I love what you guys are saying. I had actually my first experience with my second. I had taken it years ago, but then I took it again.
Here.
Yeah. What?
I got to go.
I know. One of my friends, she introduced me to it, and she was one of those who she was like, that person's at this, that person's at that person's at like, and since she, like what Paul was talking about before, like people kind of go and they take it.
Right.
Yeah. They think they know enough. Yeah, those are fans, huh? They kind of, what they do.
Hey.
Mommy's turn. What they do is they kind of like,
Hey.
Mommy's turn. They kind of go and they almost diagnose other people. And I really like how I actually had an experience that kind of like went along. We'll see if this actually. 1 second, sweetie. We'll see if he'll let me talk. I had an experience just last week about somebody who, because you were talking about someone being in their like healthy side versus unhealthy side, and something that I experienced is I came in and was ready, like I was about to tell someone some information, and I noticed cues. I noticed personality cues. And I noticed that they were not in a good headspace, which means that information that I gave them would be taken a different way than would be appropriate. And so I opted to just sit in the environment instead of provide information in the environment. And it's kind of like, that like really stuck out to me, like how when you are aware of the personality traits and how people show up when they're in their healthy side versus their unhealthy side, when you know that, you can better predict how to interact with them, like with sales pitching, with relationships, with with growth, with everything, and with yourself especially. Yep, that is Mater. So anyway, those have been my thoughts coming through.
Yeah, and we've got Ryan here coming in as well. So I had an interesting conversation last night with Kirsten, and we were talking about when we first met, we'd sit at a coffee shop, and I was writing my book at the time, and I was going to read the manuscript to her. Morning, Ryan. And I decided to press in. Now I have a tendency to go 5. Like I don't need to be known. Like I assume nobody cares anyhow. And the last thing I really want to do is read a book that I wrote and ask you, because even if you say you're interested, I figure you're probably not. And that's fine. I can be fine alone. Well, I pushed every time I read this book. It was over weeks. Every time I'd say, hey, I'd like to read what I wrote to you. That was like fighting against a massive current in me, overcoming just a lot of mental gymnastics to fight against the voice that was like, she doesn't care. This doesn't matter. Just do it alone. Even Paul, I was like, well, he probably doesn't care about this because I'm paying him to be my coach. And like all of these mental gymnastics. So I've had to fight against in that moment, opening up. And, if we look at her, we had this probably half hour conversation last night. When I was reading that book to her, in her mind, she was like, oh, great. I get to understand who this guy is because he keeps reading me the things that he says matter to him. And she's coming at it like, give me more. And I'm coming at it from like, oh my gosh, like this is heavy lifting today to try and read a paragraph.
Yeah.
So that's the 5, right? In action. And it all is, I think the benefit of the Enneagram is not all is like to your point, Naomi, a lot of people look at other people like they're almost picking them apart. Like, I see you, I understand you. Really, the Enneagram is really about ourselves. How do I show up? And if I'm showing up, like if I'm self-isolating, I'm probably stressed. And I have to fight against that and figure out, why am I stressed? And so I've learned to sense those changes, like the sensing a temperature. It's like, sense those changes in me. I'm exhibiting these qualities. There might be something going on that I don't even know yet because I've not unpacked it. I've just been running through my life. And that's been super, super helpful. Ryan, welcome. You were talking about the Enneagram, and I know that you had mentioned that you were stoked to chat about this because I think it's kind of up your alley.
I guess. I remember you guys talking about it before, and I got curious about it, seeing it on the Thinker Gross website. So tried it out, and I think I got a 3W2. What is that?
3-wing 2. Yep.
What is that?
So that's the achiever.
Okay, the achiever. What's the
Performer.
What's the W2 mean?
So when whatever number you score the highest in, the numbers immediately to the left and to the right of it are your wings. So like you also have a 4-wing. It's just not as dominant as your 2-wing. So you're likelier to exhibit behaviors and attitudes and motivations of a 2 than you are of a 4. But both can be developed. Jason and I were talking yesterday, like for most of my life, up until the last few years, I've had a much stronger 3-wing because I'm a 4. But in the last few years, I've really poured a lot of effort into building up my 5-wing because the 5 uses the head instead of the heart. Both 3 and 4 are heart-centered numbers, whereas 5, 6, and 7 are head-centered, and 8, 9, and 1 are gut-centered. So, so when you do this, right, you get, you realize, I have this ability to use my head like a 5, but I just haven't been using it. And so I've just doubled down on doing that, on saying, I've just got to do more thinking instead of reacting with my feelings. Anyway, that's a bit of a long-winded answer to your question, but you are also square in the heart triad because 2, 3, and 4 are all in the heart triad. And so 2 is the helper. These people are really warm. They're really good at making others feel important. And what often happens to them when they're unhealthy or not paying attention is they become they're so busy looking after everyone else that they neglect themselves, and they become toxic. It can become toxic as a result. The 3, though, is an interesting number to have because they are they process life through this idea that I will be loved when I perform or deliver results, wow the audience, attract all the attention. And so life can become for them very much about get to the top and look good doing it, right? That's really, but in the process, threes can also become very, very much an external facade with no internal center. Because they don't want to look inside, right? Because what's inside may not get results or applause or votes or whatever. So they neglect it, they ignore it. And so they have a real problem with deceiving themselves and deceiving the world around them by putting on a facade of being this, this is one of the reasons so many people in Hollywood and Washington, D.C. are externally one person and internally they're another person. Anyway, that's sort of a very short summary of it, but there's a lot more to it, obviously. So
Sounds like imposter syndrome is part of that, which I can have.
Mm-hmm. Can be very much so.
So 3 wing 2 is achiever and helper, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah,
I guess
3.
it's pretty on brand.
The 3. Yeah. So 3 wing 2, as I'm reading this, charming, entertaining, need to be the star. Want to be seen as having all the generous and relational characteristics of 2s. In stress, they take on qualities of 9s, retreating into unproductive busy work and losing energy and motivation. But in security, they take on qualities of 6s, becoming warmer and more in touch with their feelings, with a desire to connect with their loved ones and do what's best for the group. Which, I look at a 3 and I exhibit very few qualities, I think, in some of these ways of a 3. Those are some qualities I've had to develop over time and feel resistance when they need to go into some of those spaces. But I've learned over time that resistance is just resistance. And what I do need to do, given the situation, is become or think like this person, even though it's totally against my tendency.
There's a dramatization of this, which some of you may have seen. Certainly it's made its way around popular culture, but The Wolf of Wall Street, the movie about Jordan Belfort, there is this, I've never watched it because it's so profanity laden. I just can't stand that. But
I loved it.
but Leonardo DiCaprio.
Paul's going to stop
DiCaprio-
having phone calls with me. Yeah. You're starting to swear too much.
No,
Joseph.
this is next level. But
Okay.
anyway, he gets up and he gives this, motivational speech to a room full of salespeople, which is a good example of how the 3 in a healthy moment can become like a 6, because 6s are loyalists, right? And they're concerned about the positive outcome for everybody involved, not just themselves. And so a 3's transition, like this is something I'm working on my 3 wing, because I have it, right? But I can be very preoccupied with just focusing on individualism on myself. But I do way better when I'm working for the benefit and positive outcomes for everybody concerned. So that's not the only example, but it's one example I've come across. It's very useful for seeing 3s can be such great motivational speakers that way. They can just turn it on for everybody in a room, and everybody suddenly feels like, yes, we can win. We can do this, So they make great locker room teammates too, if you're down by 10 points and it's, halftime and you need to win the game.
Yeah, I think it sounds pretty on brand for how I feel. For stuff that I've done in the past, I think. Cool. So, I don't know if you guys already talked about it. So this thing is like a diagram, and I guess wherever you sit on this diagram kind of spreads into the other parts of the diagram. Okay.
So it's a diagram, and some of those lines, because you'll see arrows that you're looking at them, indicate where you move in stress and where you move in growth. So if you're a
Okay.
3 in stress, you move towards 2, and in growth.
No, towards 9 or 3.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Yes. That makes more sense. I was looking at the wrong ones. Yeah. So stress, 3 moves towards a 2 to a 9, and in growth, a 3 moves to a 6.
Okay. So like I see 3, 6, and 9 are like the only ones that are that connect to an actual triangle.
Yep.
On this. Is that a thing?
They're
Like
unique
a-
in that way.
Like an is that a ladder?
I don't know
Lateral
that
triangle?
the triangle, the thing doesn't necessarily matter. It's just it's just how the diagram is laid out. And it gets complicated. One of the things that Paul and I have been talking about over time, these things shift and move, and
Mhm.
in some ways change. So I've talked about it before that I've acted through the years as an INTJ, and then through divorce and serious stress, that the thinking part of my tendencies kind of got wiped away. And I was using that as safety and security, kind of like a 5 uses being quiet as safety and security, not telling things to people as safety and security, not engaging emotionally as safety and security. And so that T now I've realized is actually an F. It's an INFJ. Only for whatever reason through the years, due to the circumstances and choices of my life and who I needed to be in any given circumstance, I became much more reliant on the thinking and much less reliant on the feelings, even though it's the feelings that if I'm quiet and alone, like the thing I'd love more than anything is to just jam out with some music and sing and getting all up in my feels. But I also can't stay there all that long because, then I feel like, well, that's pointless. And I'll go back to the T. So it's like, there is a balance and an ebb and a flow given certain circumstances and even habits that show up over time that when we dig into some of these things, we might find that we've been masquerading in a certain way because of, just needing to make it through the day and whatever else, doesn't have to be undealt with traumas or anything like that. And then as we grow and develop, we might feel like there might be other qualities that develop. And then there are things that maybe never develop because they're so foreign to us.
And see, this is the way you and I meet in the middle, Jason, because for me, it's the opposite, right? I'll feel all day, right? And so the way that this began to make sense for me was if I want to get something done and I myself am not competent in doing it, my instinctive reflex is to find someone who I feel safe with doing it and then just trust it to them. Okay. And so you and I went to a now famous call with someone who shall remain nameless, who I had and still have a very warm feeling about. They presented you with an offer. You listened politely and you went away. And later on, you revealed to me, I'm not doing that. And that was the first time I'd ever heard that. And I was like, gee, what did the guy say wrong? Did he, was he offensive or something? And then you shared with me what it was. And I was like, oh, wow. I haven't even been thinking about this. I've just been going because I go based on trust because I feel good about the person. So
Interesting.
like if when I'm not watching carefully about this stuff, that's my default is like, oh, I feel good about this person. They're warm, they're kind, they're trustworthy. They must know what they're doing. Therefore, I'll just go with them.
That is so interesting. I never would have thought that. Sorry to cut
Mhm.
you off there. Do you have another thought? Something else on that?
No. Go ahead.
What was so interesting is I'm replaying that topic in my mind now because I never would have thought that your perspective has never crossed my mind on that, because I showed up to that first call and I was like, this guy's too warm. This sounds like not a great deal. And I was just like, this is probably not a good deal. Send me the contract. And then I was like, hell no, this is a terrible idea. And it was dead on arrival. And there was and I couldn't care less how people felt about it, how I felt about it. It's like, my feeling was like, well, I should try and figure this out or something. I don't even know. It's like my feelings said, no, my feelings were like, no, this is a bad idea. And I couldn't exactly pinpoint why after I had read it in the contract. And sure enough, but that's where my natural skepticism comes in, because I ferreted out. I was skeptical from the beginning, and just assumed in some ways that I was looking out for. I was just looking at something completely different. That's very interesting.
Which I would, with a perfect stranger, I wouldn't blame you. But when I know somebody, right? When I'm familiar with them, I'm like, why not trust them? And oddly enough, right? My bride is the same way. She's a 1, so she comes at it from a different angle than you do. But the same thing sort of happens. I'm like, I found this person who can do this. Let's use them. Oh no, I'm like, why don't you trust them? Right? Because I'm feeling my way, right? I'm not thinking. And so this is one of the reasons it's good to understand this, and more importantly, why we need these alternate perspectives speaking into our background. Because, right, sometimes what's really important is the feeling, right? What is important is the emotion. A lot of other times, the emotion needs to be in the caboose, right? And this is a total thinking thing. And then, of course, you have the gut triad, and they're just instinctive reactors, right? They don't even need to think or feel; they just react, and that's not always bad either, right? Some of it, thinking triad can sit there. Well, let's just think about it and think about it ad nauseum. Feeling triad, well, let's just go over here and wait till we feel like it. And the gut triad's like, what are you doing? You're wasting time. We know what we're supposed to do. Let's just go do it.
Yeah.
Right.
So Ryan and Naomi, you're newer to the Enneagram. I took the test again, something like 8 years ago, among a handful of friends. Just to figure each other out. And it was super helpful and interesting. And then Paul absorbed himself into it, and it absorbed him, he absorbed it. They became one, probably a year ago, something like that. And you guys are new to this Enneagram thing. What are your perspectives as you have uncovered these bullet points about yourself?
Mine is weird. Like I'm reading more into it, but you go first, Naomi.
Safe to let me talk. I haven't looked at mine. I've been trying to search my phone to see if I can find it somewhere. But so I don't really feel like I can answer right now, because I feel like I don't have that familiarity with it. I need to go back and review, because I'm wondering if I find my old results, does it change? Like that would be the question that I have. Have Paul or Jason, have either of you noticed, as you've grown as a person, as you've developed as a person, has your result changed?
So
Eat the apple. Mommy,
So-
eat the apple.
when my mom never took the test, but I'm almost certain she was a 9. She was go with the flow, sweet as could be, never rock the boat, merging with others, forgetting herself in the process. And then I remember being like that as a boy. I think the better way to look at it, Naomi, is not to say that you change definitively from one type to the next, but that they fluctuate. They rise and fall depending on your experience, external factors. How you interpret and process that is the core engine there. And so I've taken the test dozens of times now because I keep thinking the way I pay attention to my own behavior, I feel more like an 8 right now than I do like a 4. Like I feel like I just keep running up against these things. So when I last took the test, I've never not got 4 as my main lens, but I have seen 5 come up and 3 go down. I've seen 8 is steady, like number 2. I have a lot of 8 in me. But 2 goes up as well. It has come up from where it used to be. And then, 7 remains permanently small and stuff like that. So I think they fluctuate over time, but I think the point of figuring out which number you most strongly correspond to over and over again is to understand how you're taking in and then what you're putting out as a result. So if you're taking things in primarily, through your responses to them, if your response is anger, right? If what gets you going manifests itself in anger, that's a good sign you're consistently an 8, 9, or 1. If it's shame, it's a 2, 3, or 4, and if it's fear, it's a 5, 6, or 7. So if you react to life, to adversity and setbacks and all that through anger, that's one cue, et cetera, et cetera. I think the point of it, the point of having the number is not to, again, as we said at the outset, is not to pigeonhole yourself, but just to understand. I react I react out of shame. Like if I'm being exposed as incompetent or foolish, I'm not reacting the same way Jason would for being exposed for the same thing, right? His is going to be fear-based. Mine is going to be shame-based. So I hope that answers your question. I kind of got off on a tangent there.
Mine, I've been reading up on my, I guess, 3W2 wing, and I'm looking at a chart that says that 91% of type 3s do not have a wing type. In other words, they are core type 3s, and 6.8% of type 3s are 3W2, 3.8% are 3W4. I don't know if that means anything. And it also says my career choice should be entrepreneur, actor, presenter, or pilot. Man,
you weren't a pilot, but you were
flight
an
attendant.
airline. You were a flight attendant.
Yeah.
You're becoming an entrepreneur, and you have a podcast where you act.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a trip. You should. This got me reading into my what do you call it? MBTI, Myers-Briggs too, and yeah, the Myers-Briggs one is even weirder because I'm an ENTJ, and it says that my type is rare.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, you're ENTJ. That's real interesting because I was INTJ for a long time, but I'm really INFJ. I'm like this weird split that's balanced. And when I take the Enneagram test, I'm there's a handful of types that are just really clustered at the top, and then there are a handful of types that are clustered way at the bottom. And I can sense, because my brain is so circumstantial, because I have this high degree of self-awareness almost, that I'm manipulating myself even through these various circumstances.
I get the self-awareness thing too. I often try not to take these tests because I feel like I'll change the result if I take them too soon between each other, because I'll see the answers and then I'll see the questions and change my answer based on what I thought I answered before. And one time I got in the Myers-Briggs, I've only taken this Enneagram thing once, and that was before it was brought up to talk about this. It was like over the weekend or something. but I've taken the Myers-Briggs a couple times, and I've always gotten ENTJ, except for once while I was working at Yelp in sales, and I got whatever was the Guardian. I got that, and then I was like, "That's not me." And I think it was because my job had changed my personality a little bit. And then when I stopped doing the job, I took it again, and I came back to ENTJ, which is weird.
The statistic you mentioned there, Rye, about the overwhelming majority of threes don't have strong wings, sounds right. And I'm not, I don't claim to this in any sort of expert way, because I haven't looked into it, but threes tend to be the most one-dimensional type of personalities, and that's not necessarily in a bad way, right? They have 5 basic emotions: happy, sad, anger, angry, afraid, and I forget what the other ones are, right? And that's all they do. They don't get into various states of melancholy like a 4 does, right? I can have melancholy that feels absolutely blissful, strange as it sounds, right? Because my emotional inner landscape is at full blast 24 hours a day. So like things that Jason would look at it and say, big deal. I'll be feeling that for hours. Exactly the same experience. Naomi, I can see you're a little tied up there, but I was going to see if I could maybe ask a few questions to sort of get a feel for how you process the world. I'm thinking back to like anger, shame, or fear. And just based on past conversations where you've shared things about, experiences you've had and all of that, do you feel duty bound to other people? Do you feel like you give too much of yourself, and self-care is problematic? Do you feel like, right, there are expectations on you that just have to be met at whatever the cost? Or have you felt that way?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
100%.
Would you say that when you don't live up to those expectations, do you deal with a lot of shame?
Probably. That's probably the emotion, because I'm like thinking through the emotions. Like when you were saying it, I was like thinking through the emotions. I'm like you, where I get like I'll be thinking about. I'm very tired. Pretty drunk, tired, bigger. You were talking about how like you'll be thinking about something for a long time after, where Jason can like let it roll off. I'm the same way. Like I'll be thinking about it for a long time after, like an interaction, whether it's good or bad. I'll be like, oh no, I hope they're okay. Or no, like they're like, whether
Yeah.
it's, oh, could I have done more? We passed a car accident one time in the rain, and I was wearing a raincoat because we were gonna go on a family outing or whatever. And I was like, should I stop them, give them my jacket, my rain jacket? Like, and my husband he was like, the police officers had it handled, but
Yeah.
I was literally like, you should have given them my jacket. Why didn't I give them my rain jacket? He's like, there's not. It's Florida. There's not much you're gonna do about the rain. So,
Do
I
you
guess
ever
that's
feel?
shame.
Well, it can be, right? And so you have to keep digging until you get to what's driving you, because it could also be an extreme sense of obligation, of duty. Like, it could be like a 6, right? Sixes can be very preoccupied with making sure that everyone else is all right and everybody has what they need, and right, they're extremely. My wife's second most dominant trait is 6, which is why our entire family wears sunscreen indoors on a cloudy day, right? So,
Do you
so
really?
it could be that, right? But when you dig into it, you'll find out like what are the motivations, and yep. Little guy stealing the show there. Anyway, yeah, you dig into it, like you could be, first glance, I've seen and heard a lot of 2 kind of things come from you in the past, but 6s are the hardest ones for me to spot. Like I met a guy recently who was a 6 in my mastermind. he told me he was a 6, and I was like, I would not have pegged you for one. So could be that, or it could be one of the other signs, and we just don't know.
I'll have to take the test. I need to take the test again because I don't think I. Golly God. I haven't found it on my phone or in my email or anything. I thought I had emailed it to myself. I don't think I did. So I'll need to take it and get back to you guys and see because I yeah, I'll have to look at it.
Yeah, it's interesting to uncover these things because I think it helps us navigate more effectively. We can see where we're at on our own map, and then we can also relate to other folks, I think, in a more informed way because we just got more information. Hey, I know I'm showing up outside of where I want to show up because of these tendencies, or the task at hand I'm not going to be very effective in it because of these tendencies. So I either need to grow in a certain area, or I need to go find somebody who does have those tendencies and they're in their strength in those moments, which, again, is not a pigeonholing of anybody. You're not stuck in a hole. It's just the path that's worn, and you can move out of it. It's going to be a little difficult, but worth the effort. I'm coming up on a end of my availability here for the workshop call. You're welcome to continue this on. I know it got started just a little bit late. I think maybe we should probably do a follow-up call. Maybe you can do a LinkedIn Live on this and invite some practitioners, because I think the idea of personal growth, whoever said it, that being an entrepreneur is one of the greatest opportunities for personal growth, because you're confronted with yourself every damn day, and the pressures are significantly more than when you're not an entrepreneur. Because now you're dealing with yourself, you're dealing with your vendors, you're dealing with your customers, you're dealing with employees, you're dealing with like everybody, and sometimes with a kid on your lap too. So it's just, there's no adventure quite like it. And so I think the end result is, whatever comes of it, the entrepreneurs need to be armed with as much information as they can to be able to grow most effectively. And that's the opportunity. The gift of being an entrepreneur is growing in these areas, because you're presented with the need to. That's my opinion. Anybody else have any closing thoughts? Or I can jump off if you want to continue off. If you want to continue on.
I got a quick story. This is long before I'd studied any of this, but I had an 8 client one time. This is back when I was in the insurance industry. And I went to visit him one day, and I said, your policy is lacking some important coverage. Now, he owned a restaurant where he served extremely expensive high-end steaks, like beef and all of that. And he didn't have spoilage coverage. And I looked into it and I said, your policy is about to renew. I'm attaching spoilage coverage. And he goes, spoilage coverage, I don't need that stuff. What are you talking about? And it just came to me. I wasn't planning it. And I looked him dead in the eye. I said, you need this. And then he went, fine, put it on there.
Right.
Had I done that with another personality type, could have gone exactly the opposite way. Could have made it worse. They would have shopped around for another agent. He liked the fact that I told him dead in the face, because he's an 8, right? He liked that. He was like, I respect it. The guy knows what he's talking about. I can trust him. So it's just good to know. Like, it's because, you'll have other people where you got to handle that much differently. And, so, if we don't pay attention to this, we're going to be like that broken clock. We get it right twice a day, and the rest of the time we'll mess it up.
Right.
But that's all I have.
Okay.
I'll need to go take this test and report back.
Yeah. Take the Enneagram.
And let's do a follow-up. In fact, Jason, that author that we've talked to, an author who is a specialist in the Enneagram in the past. Maybe we should invite her on.
Yeah, I have a friend who wrote a whole book on something like this, on career paths and stuff, and has the Enneagram. The Enneagram is actually part of the content. Maybe I could write her as well.
Yep, that'd be awesome. Well, good. Great conversation. I got to bounce. What?
Sorry, I just no. I just remembered that next week I'll be in Europe.
Oh, awesome! Hey, congratulations.
Have a good
That's
time.
great.
You
Rob.
still have a great background for your video when we do this meeting.
Yeah, you're not
Yeah,
gonna have this meeting is going to be
as
playing around.
like, yeah, I'll be on a double-decker bus or something.
Nice.
on Zoom.
Well,
Love it.
a great topic. I think for all of us, whether entrepreneurs or not, I think understanding, delving into how we show up for ourselves and others is super important and a great opportunity, especially if we're going to be effective in our entrepreneurial ventures. So look forward to having this conversation again in the future. And yes, Naomi, I think everybody should go retake the Enneagram test if you
I'm
haven't.
going to retake it.
We'll throw the link in the comments. And then if anybody has anybody that you want to have on, let's do a LinkedIn Live and have a whole discussion about it with all of our peers out in the world. So thanks, everybody. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the Tuesday workshop.
Thanks for your patience.
You're good, man.
Thanks for being patient with my extra person.
Oh, absolutely.
Your co-star, no doubt.
All righty. Thanks, everybody. Talk soon.
See you guys.